Would you describe yourself as a multi-passionate creative? If so, you might also be struggling with perfectionism and wondering how the heck you overcome it. So if that sounds like you, then you're looking at a fellow multi-passionate creative who is also a perfectionist, and I'm going to share some tips of how I'm overcoming my perfectionism. Are you a creative who struggles with completing personal projects, or perhaps you find yourself constantly starting new endeavours but never quite finishing them? If any of that sounds like it rings true for you, then no, you're not alone. Like I said in the intro, I am a fellow multi-passionate creative who struggles with a touch of perfectionism as well. As a fellow creative who is also self-employed, I fully understand the challenges that we face when it comes to completing projects and managing deadlines, especially when they are self-led projects. That's why I began to wonder, well, why is this? What is causing this? And I even began to wonder whether my Myers-Briggs type indicator could have some answers. So whether you're a writer or designer or some other type of creative, in this video we're going to be looking at a few strategies that can help you stay motivated and complete your projects, especially when they are self-led. Now, as I said, I was wondering whether my Myers-Briggs type indicator might have something to do with some of the challenges that I face. Now, if you've not heard of Myers-Briggs type indicator, it's essentially a personality test based on the theories of Carl Jung. And it essentially measures 4 types of traits that create 16 different personality types. So here are the 4 almost like opposing pairs of traits. They are extroversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. Now, I'm not an MBTI/Myers-Briggs type indicator professional, so this is just based on the research that I've done for myself based on looking into my own personality traits. Knowing your Myers-Briggs type indicator can really give you an insight into your personality traits, your strengths, and your weaknesses, which can help you better understand yourself and your motivations. I personally use it as a tool for self-improvement to help me identify areas that just need a little bit more development, but it also helps me to better understand the barriers and the challenges that I face and why I might be facing them. Psychological barriers that could cause some pain points for creatives when it comes to time or task management can include things like procrastination, perfectionism, fear of failure, and prioritizing tasks. But one of the main things that I've struggled with as an INFP on the Myers-Briggs type indicator is perfectionism. For me, what it would often look like is I'd get caught in a loop of constantly critiquing and reviewing my work, trying to tweak it and improve it with each pass, trying to reach this level of perfectionism that maybe just was unrealistic. However, what I came to realize recently, that this pursuit of flawlessness is actually a form of procrastination. It's an attempt, a futile attempt, to shield myself from putting my work out there for people to evaluate, for it to maybe fail, and to just avoid those icky feelings of something not being perfect and essentially flopping. But knowing my Myers-Briggs type indicator means that I now understand that INFPs often put very high standards on themselves. They're known for being idealistic, they're really empathic, so they're quite sensitive as well, and it's just a recipe for creating quite a high level of perfectionism. But knowing this has been a pivotal realization for me, because it now means that I can find not necessarily ways that I'm going to overcome it. I'm sorry I used that language in the title of this video because I know it's the language that I was using. So if you've clicked on it, it's probably the language that you're using it. You want ways, strategies and tips for overcoming, for killing perfectionism, for switching it off. And sometimes that kind of language is what's going to get you, because it's what you're using, but it's not going to help you. Actually, what it's more about is finding coping strategies that are going to help you move forward, rather than thinking you're either perfectionist or you're not a perfectionist, that it's a binary on off and that it can be switched off, because really it can't. We've all got a certain degree of perfectionism within us. Some people it's just a little bit, and then others it's quite a lot, but the majority of people probably fall somewhere in the middle of those two spectrums. So with all of this talk of Myers-Briggs type indicator and me saying that I'm an INFP, you might be nodding along with some of the things that I've said and are wondering whether you are also an INFP. So here are some things to ask yourself. Do you tend to be introspective and reflective, preferring to spend time alone or with a small group of close friends? Are you guided by your emotions and values? Are you often motivated by a desire to help others? Are you a multi-passionate creative who loves the ideation process and deep thinking? If you've answered yes, then you could quite possibly be an INFP as well. To self-identify your Myers-Briggs type indicator, you can take a test online. I will pop a link below to the official Myers-Briggs type indicator evaluation tool. I personally used the 16 personalities version. It's pretty much the same. It's based on the same principles as Myers-Briggs, but they use slightly different language and wording, and they also have a 5th code letter for their indicator, which determines how you handle stress. Now the 16 personalities one is free, which is kind of why I went for that one. But yeah, I will pop a link below. Not affiliated to either of those links, just sharing some resources that I found helpful. Now, as a side note, any personality test that you take is just a guide. It's not a definitive hard and fast rules for how you should live your life or make important decisions, especially if you are doing a self-identification method using an online tool. So just a caveat, this is just going to give you some insights into your personality traits and tendencies, and it usually involves answering a series of questions. Expect to spend around 20 to 30, maybe even 40 minutes going through answering different questions based on your behaviors and your tendencies. And you may find that some of the questions you'll be thinking, didn't I just answer this question 15 questions back? You probably did, but it's worded in a slightly different way, just to make sure that it is getting the true essence of you, not this ideal version that you wish you were. So if you are an INFP, you might be wondering, oh, why do we struggle with perfectionism? Well, the I in INFP stands for introverted. So introverted personality types tend to be hardwired to be hard on themselves, and this means pretty much most of the I personality types, so the INFPs or the INFJs, they will struggle with perfectionism, but it will be for very different reasons. So some possible reasons for an INFP to be struggling with perfectionism are: INFPs tend to be highly creative and imaginative, meaning they are multi-passionate and full of ideas. This can lead to frustration because they may find it difficult to translate their ideas into something fruitful and tangible. Now, this in turn can lead to idealistic and perfectionistic tendencies because they worry about selecting the best idea to move forward with. INFPs are also driven by a desire to make a positive impact on the world, which can translate to striving for perfection in their work. I know that for me, anything less than perfect kind of feels like a failure, which makes it really hard for me to move forward with my ideas and actually put them out there into the world. Also, INFPs tend to be highly sensitive and emotional, which can make criticism or negative feedback quite hard to take sometimes. And that in turn can lead to this fear of failure and a desire to avoid all mistakes at any cost, which then leads to the procrastination of not actually putting your ideas out there for the world to evaluate. So if any of that is resonating with you, then just know that you are not alone. I pretty much suffer with all of those things with pretty much everything I do. And yeah, I just want to share some tips and strategies that are going to help you not necessarily overcome, but definitely help you move forward and get to the other side. So here we are, 4 ways in which I'm conquering perfectionism as an INFP. And again, I'm caveating that I really struggle with words like conquering and overcome. Like perfectionism is this binary on-off thing. As I said before, it's not. It's a spectrum. But again, I know the kind of language that you're using, the internal dialogue that's going on in your head. Oh, if I could just not be so much of a perfectionist, this project would be out already. Why do I keep tweaking it? I wish I could just overcome my tendency to want things to be perfect. That's the kind of language that you're using. So that's the language that I've used to say, hey, over here, I've got something that might help you. The thing that's going to actually help you is working with coping mechanisms. So recognizing that you're not going to overcome it or switch it off. I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again because it's so important. It's about having coping strategies that are going to help you to move forward, not strategies that are going to make you become some new person overnight. So number 1, brain dumping. I love to do a bit of brain dumping. I just get everything out onto paper. I let my mind go off on tangents, and it's absolutely fine to do that because if I didn't do it down on paper, it would stay stuck in my head and it would keep going around and around and around and around. And that's no good because you're just going to get trapped in your own overthinking thoughts. So brain dumping is a great way to start getting things down and clearing out the clutter in your mind. And if you want some more tips and strategies for brain dumping, I will pop a link to a useful resource in the description below. Coping mechanism number 2 is planning. I am really good now at scheduling time, setting a time limit, and setting an outcome when it comes to planning my time when I'm going to be working on projects. The great thing about this is it stops you getting stuck in that overthinking / tinkering process. Like I said before, I can get stuck in a loop of evaluating and tweaking my projects, trying to get to this level of perfect, which just doesn't exist. But if I set myself a time limit, this is how much time I'm going to work on this project, as well as an outcome for what I expect to have achieved at the end of that allotted time, then it's just going to make me be a little bit more ruthless with myself when I catch myself. Should I tweak this to the left? Do I tweak it to the right? Should I use this style font? Should I change the font to this style? All of those little like overthinking what would make this more perfect when it's probably done and it is good to go. The third coping strategy is mindful moments. I know it sounds a bit woo-woo, having a mindful moment, but it's so important to take breaks. Again, if you are in that overthinking loop of critiquing, reviewing and tweaking your work, sometimes you need to just step away from the piece that you're working on. Go get in nature. That's one of my favorite things. I will sit in my garden. I will have a drink, like rehydrate, because sometimes that's not good for you either if you've got a bit of a thirst going on in the background and you don't realize it. So yeah, just taking that time to reset your focus by having a break away from the piece of work that you are currently struggling with in terms of tweaking. Is it perfect yet? No, it's not. Is this good? Is this good enough? Will people like it? Will people hate it? Will it be a massive flop failure? That when you hear that internal dialogue going on in your head, it's time to take a break. The fourth coping strategy / mechanism is radical acceptance. And again, this is another bit of a woo-woo one, but I've come to realize that by not embracing some of my flaws I'm actually rejecting a part of myself, and that's never a good place to be emotionally or mentally. So I'm learning to accept flaws in my work as part of my personal growth journey, and also trying to embrace good enough by asking myself, does this piece of work need to be 100% perfect? If so, why? Now let me know in the comments, has any of this thus far resonated with you? Do you like some of these coping mechanisms? Are you going to be trying them out for yourself? Or do you know a fellow creative who you can see is getting stuck in the critique, review, tweak loop? Then share it with them. They may find this helpful in knowing that actually it's just a part of their personality and they just need a few little coping mechanisms to help them move forward. It's really important to remember that in order to live our life to its fullest potential, we have to embrace our whole self. That means even learning to embrace and cope with the less than desirable traits of our personality.